Now, listen, 10 o'clock, we discussed Greg Wallace yesterday. Our 10 o'clock conversation is not, and I think the report's out today, the Silkins report, which was commissioned by Banerjee, the production company. More on that later, no doubt. But our discussion after 10 is not about Greg Wallace, but it's about what loads of you said on the phones yesterday. So we thought we'd pick it up and run with it because we had such a big response on one aspect of the story. We want to talk about autism and your life because it was such a huge response. Many pointing out that being neurodivergent is not a free pass to behave badly. Of course, he cited in his Instagram post, his lengthy and very interesting Instagram post, the fact that he's now been diagnosed as an autistic person. Friends close to him say he has an oddity of filters and boundaries, and there's a report in the Times today which says that he can't wear underwear, according to his friends. Greg Wallace denies engaging in behaviour of a sexual nature. But away from that, we want to hear from you about the reality, because there's a lot of myths. A lot of people said yesterday there are loads of myths. Everyone's an individual. Everyone's not the same. You can't say, oh, autistic people are like that or they are like that. So we want to know, we want to explore this. How does it affect your life, yourself, a loved one? What barriers and hurdles have you and your family had to overcome? That is going to be our exploration and right, autism and your life. Big response yesterday. Loads of texts, particularly when we were discussing the Greg Wallace situation. We're going to leave the Greg Wallace situation, notwithstanding mentioning that he said it was an element, his diagnosis of autism in some of his behaviour. Some people were pretty outraged by that, saying the fact that you're autistic does not mean you behave like that. That was an understandable response from many of you. His friends have spoken about an oddity of filters and boundaries. It's revealed today from some of his friends that he can't wear underwear. And he says broadcasters like the BBC need to do more to support neurodivergent employees. Well, by the way, that big report by the MasterChef production company is published later today. Now, that'll be another matter of future comment and conversation. But as I say, taking it away from Greg Wallace, was lots of issues yesterday, lots of response yesterday. So we want to do a bit of myth busting here, because you can't categorize all people as the same because they are autistic. Somebody said really powerfully on the phone in yesterday, everyone is an individual. Everyone is different. So whether it be yourself, family, friends, tell me about the reality of living with autism. 08085 909 693 and 85058. Get in touch now.
This is BBC Radio 5 Live.
Dan Harris, are you there, Dan, now?
I am. Hello.
Yeah. Wasn't that fascinating? You were so interesting yesterday as well. It's really good to have you back. Yeah, carry on.
I just want to amplify the great meaning and messaging that Danielle passed on, which is that, we need to stop thinking about autism as a disorder. We should not be talking about autism spectrum disorder. We should be talking about autism spectrum condition. So we recognise that autism is a broad spectrum, and you've met one autistic individual and you've only met that one individual. It's also not true, and I'd love to get Danielle's views on this, is that it's wrong to say that everyone is on the autistic spectrum. We are not all autistic.
Oh, we're all a little bit autistic. It's so insulting, and it also dismisses the difficulties and the challenges that we face every day, because you might have some autistic traits, you might see things in neurotypicals that neurodivergents have. It's an extreme level, and it is not the same at all.
That must be so annoying, and it's something, as I said, Dan, I might have said it yesterday too in our first hour discussion. It's something that people say far too readily and easily, Dan, isn't it?
It is, and some of the callers who dialed in yesterday, also that indicates the lack of understanding that the great British public have, which is, autism is not a young white boy lining up trains on the floor. Okay, we need to get away from that really
It can
damaging
be,
narrative. It
right?
can be, but it's not the primary vision that we want for the autistic community, because things like the Rain Man movie, that was incredibly damaging, I think, because
Wasn't
what
it?
that did is, with Dustin Hoffman,
Yeah.
so that set the kind of the cultural viewpoint that autistic people are this certain thing, whereas actually we have a massive underdiagnosis and underrepresentation of women and girls. It's not surprising to hear Danielle say that she was diagnosed at 43, because the vast majority of autistic women who contact me say, look, absolutely true. We were diagnosed with anxiety disorder, borderline personality disorder, lots of different things. But it was only in the latter stages of our life have we actually got a correct and accurate diagnosis.
Are you pleased, Dan, that this has come up in the whole Greg Wallace story? Has this been, I mean, it's been a gateway to discuss it. That's a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's been painful as a topic because ideally we wouldn't have to discuss this. But actually, if we're thinking about neurodiversity as a social movement, it's good that we are having these discussions. And we definitely appreciate, the leadership being shown by the BBC here, because the disabling element of autism for some people, it's in how society deals with us and how society supports us rather than the autism itself. And if we can move away from that medical model whereby we're only talking about diagnoses and labels into a societal model where actually we're talking about how can workplaces and how can society get the best out of autistic people, then we find those are better outcomes, not just for the autistic people, but also the neurotypicals.
And with autism, there are a number of potentially comorbidities, ADHD and other things, Danielle. My nephew we would be described, and I've heard it described in the past as severely autistic, and needs a lot of care and has to live in a residential home. But there are a number of other issues that go along with that in his life, Danielle.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, my son's he needs care daily. He's 24. He has just left home, but he's very close by, and we care for him. He won't work a job. He doesn't have friends. He doesn't socialize. He needs feeding. He needs prompting to do things like that. And then there's me. It displays very differently in everybody. It doesn't mean, though, I think when people say high functioning, that label, I'm not keen on that one either, to be honest, just because I feel it's very dismissive. Yes, I'm high functioning, but I have tons and tons of trauma that go hand in hand with that. And I've had a whole lifetime to unpick. Whereas my son hasn't had to deal with any of that, so it's kind of high functioning is very dismissive for me.
So much of the language is interesting, isn't it? On the spectrum, high functioning, all that. And it's good that you're making us think about this. Dan, I heard you in the background there when Danielle was mentioning the problem with that phrase, high functioning. Do you want to come in on that?
Yes, because the autism spectrum is not a linear spectrum. There is an absolute incorrect assumption that low functioning moves from left to right to high functioning. The reality is that we have a complexity of different profiles. So we may have sensory needs, we may have emotional needs, and these are things which cannot be reduced to a label of high functioning or low functioning. What we need to be moving towards is understanding the kind of the needs-based model, whereby what does that individual need in order to succeed, and that will be different between me and Danielle and my son Joshy and her son as well.